Hi, my name is John Lee, and I'm here with Dr. Okokon Udo, and we're both wanted to have a conversation, particularly on this July 4th holiday, around what it means in terms of independence. What does liberation mean? And the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, what liberation may mean, both for us personally, but also in this time right now, and also in relation to what Dr. Udo brings as coach, consultant, companion, as well as myself in terms of spiritual direction as well. So just to introduce ourselves, Okokon, why don't you introduce yourself in terms of who you are and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Wow, that's a deep philosophical question.
Isn't it? We're going to give them their money's worth here.
Yeah, it's a good way to get started. Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. And it's an honor to be in conversation with you around, you know what, it's like it's like this river flowing through. We'll be forming it as we go. So who am I? Wow. I think what it triggers right away, are the different parts of who I am, So if I think about who I am in the context of my education and orientation, I was kind of brought up to start talking about the externals, of title and degrees and roles and responsibilities. I'm not going to go down that road. I'm going to go down the cultural route, where somebody would go, in my ancestral village, that would mean whose son are you and whose grandpa, because they want to connect you to your lineage, and people can immediately go, oh, we know, oh, that. So I'm a son, and from this tiny village in Nigeria called Ikoridara, that through all kinds of interactions, which will show up in a story later on, it took the village to raise me. It takes the world to sustain me right now. And so I am connected in so many different ways. I am married, I'm a parent, I'm a grandparent, I'm a citizen, and I'm a citizen of no one country. I'm a citizen of the world. And I set up my camp in different places, at different times. So in Nigeria, in America, right now I'm in Europe because my wife is European. And so I claim home wherever I go. And I feel connected in deep ways to Mother Earth and nature, and have an obligation and responsibility to sustain her and preserve, nature, because nature supports and feeds me and models all kinds of things in different ways. I'm also a spiritual person. So I'm religious, but that's not what defines my spirituality. My spirituality is defined by nature that I talked about, religion, my relationships, my awareness of all that is and all that will be. So I will leave it at that for now.
Good. Oh, that's wonderful.
It triggered a lot, as you can see.
Yeah. And even you saying that, for me, the same thing in terms of it's, not necessarily the degrees and whatever else, but in terms of, as you were saying this, who else, and I'm picturing it behind you even, that sense of circle and peace behind you, that's in the background, but who else sits in the room with us that has offered us into this space right now? And for me, the same thing culturally. My parents were immigrants to this country, so I was born here in the United States. But my parents, Li Benzong is my father, Xi Yiyong is my mother. Came from Hubei province, came from Anhui province. That lineage, ancestry has brought me to this place, and it's definitely been instilled in terms of I'm not separate, that all these forces, including the two provinces. My dad actually traveled around quite a bit when he was younger. And then coming here in the United States, where home and that idea of home is multifaceted. And in many ways, even hearing you talk about your story, for me, in the same sense, thinking about all the things, all the events, all the people, all of the elements that have contributed to me being home here. And then also in terms of how do I continue to be home for other people? How do I continue to be home for the earth that I'm connected to, that has always drawn me in? And same thing in terms of spiritual person, but that's both that sense of awe and humbling in terms of the roots that have given life to this and to the seeds that have been planted for me to be formed also. So yeah, and I love what you said in terms of being a citizen of this cosmos and one another in the same way. And for me, much the same thing in terms of growing up culturally with, in terms of two very native Chinese parents, and then growing up in the United States and having to sometimes live in both worlds, and also feeling when I was younger, the tension of pulling on both myself and also how I would interact with the world. But then as I've gotten older and understand in terms of both the tension in itself brings a lot of beauty in terms of the things that I'm curious about, the things that are important to me in terms of the world, like you said, stewardship of our resources, and also stewardship of our relationship to each other as well. Those are fascinating and just wonderful thoughts in relation to all that. And so that's a little bit of who I am. And, both Okokon and I both have bios. You can read about the bios and whatever else.
Yeah, that part anyone can read.
But this is the part that's harder to get to in terms of feeling.
Yeah, that we often don't talk about as much. It's like you meet the person and we bounce off of each other as if we are rubber balls, coming and going. Oh, doctor this, oh, Mr. that, oh, Reverend that. And underneath that is the real essence of who these people are that show up in those spaces. So thanks for pulling it together so beautifully and anchoring it in this notion of home.
Yeah. No, thank you. And that kind of brings us, so we both come into this country with a lot of feelings. I know for me in terms of gratitude, humility, knowing that there's a story and a narrative and a lineage also, a river that has been moving that now I'm placed into as well. But as we're coming to the founding of our country, the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are inalienable rights that this country was founded on. I wanted us to talk a little bit and just hear from you in terms of particularly that idea of independence and liberty. How does that connect in terms of with your particular experience and story and your understanding of also who you are in all of that too?
Wow. Yeah.
Easy question, but
yeah, I mean, independence. I think there is something exciting about, the word, because there is an element of freedom that is rooted in the meaning of that word, of being free from something or standing on your own. There is something beautiful about that, in finding one's voice, in finding one's, discovering one's core essence, in connecting to what is important for me, as a person, as a contribution that I've been invited and blessed, by the universe to bring forward. Those are all great. So in my life, I wouldn't give that up for anything, because although we have so many billions of humans on the planet, I am the only me that has been offered to the planet. So in that sense, it's like how beautiful it is that I discover myself fully and bring that to the table, kind of in in a community with other people who have discovered themselves too.
Mm.
But implied in that independence very often is this sense to which we miss a big part of what we were created to be and who we were created to be. I believe fundamentally that I was created to be in relationship, with other people and with other realms of being. We talked about spirituality in our introduction. We talked about cultural heritage. Like, there is so much richness in that domain of our diversity and abundance that if all I am doing is defaulting to this sense of discovering me, being me, and bringing myself forward, I can often end up being either in total disregard of other people or in competition with other people.
Mm.
And I think that's the risk that we run in this sense as Americans, who want to be clear about who we are and what we are about, that we forget that there is still a circle, that holds us all, together and invites us to be in relationship. It doesn't mean that it's going to be smooth sailing, but to know that the bond that holds us is bigger than the things that divide us. So we can commit to figuring it out. If I'm not getting along with you, to do all I can to be in right relation with you, rather than, oh, it doesn't matter, I can move on and do me, and as I say that, that's part of what is ripping our country apart right now and ripping the world apart, because the sense of us, it has been so minimized, and the sense of who I am and what I need so magnified that we are so far apart, at so many different levels. So that's my first take on it. How about you?
Yeah, I think one thing that you said in particular that really strikes me is this sense of both how alluring that word is, independence, liberty, to be free beyond things that are holding us or shackling us. I think about my own parents coming in this country because of the promise of and the potential of, for them, the sense of wanting their children to prosper and have choice, for them as well. And yet that realization is that I keep hearing it, as you were saying this, and I was thinking about my own story, this sense of freedom also does not mean not being tied to other people, but with it is like not in a guilt sense, but a responsibility sense, in terms of, clearly it feels like we're biologically tied to be together. And just recently reading a book, Susan Simard, called Searching for the Mother Tree, where she's a tree biology professor. And she found these connections between different species of plants, where there's a fungus connection that actually underground that you can't see, where they're literally, they thought that, like, let's clear cut everything and only have the trees that are cash crops for us in Canada. And her research was like, no, you actually need this diversity, because they give each other and they receive from each other nutrients, messages, and they help each other thrive. And that sense of, an ash tree is not the same as a pine tree, is not the same as an elderberry bush, but yet somehow they're connected and offering something different and receiving something different from each other, that I can't help but think in terms of both my experience and my parents' experience of coming here, where it's like, yes, culturally, ethnically, we're Chinese. They probably didn't realize this, but it's like, for me, realizing even so, it's like, yeah, but I wasn't born in China. And there's this different amalgamation that I am somehow both different, but that difference is not necessarily a threat, but can be something that can be a gift that allows me to engage and connect. And then also the other sense of learning and growing in a different way. the other part that you said in terms of that's ripping our country apart, and we see the tension and the polarities of where it could be easy for me, just as an example, that I can just go be with other second generation Chinese people and we'll just talk about the world to ourselves, and it can be an echo chamber. But much like our conversation, that's like, but I might be missing out on all this other perspective and possibly even nourishment, if I'm a tree in this example, all this other nourishment and growth from somebody else who has a totally different perspective that actually helps me, both see myself in a different way, but then also frees myself to become something even more, and to hold that. It seems like a lot. It seems like a lot to hold, but yet there's something very organic and very beautiful about what that may be.
Yeah.
I was going to ask. Go ahead.
When you were sharing your story, that was really like deep and profound. And one of the things you touched on was how you are different from your parents because you were not born in China. And that brand of being Americans is also different from your brand of being American, as is different from mine. And so when we get to this point of wanting to define America in a very narrow way without understanding all these intersectional identities that come in, we also miss the point of what America is and what needs to be celebrated. So paradoxically, as we celebrate Independence Day, implied in that is our interconnectedness and dependence, because it takes all of us to, you see what I mean? To breathe life into the independent America. So it was hitting me in those ways. I'm like, oh, the two are actually connected, because who is American,
Yeah. From your own experience, and this might be the last question for us, but from your own experience, what's been helpful for you to move away from that sense of tribalism, of separation? And I want to stand on my own 2 feet, or we're going to stand on our own feet together and circle the wagons, as opposed to, which is very defensive, as opposed to the sense of opening up, so that interchange and that sense of potential and nourishment and interconnectedness can happen. What has been helpful that you've seen in your practice, and also being with other people and walking with them in that way too?
I think 2 major things. One is being born in Nigeria. And for folks that do not know much about Nigeria, Nigeria is a country about the size of Texas State, but the population is over 200 million right now.
It's still growing fast.
And in that, it's growing really fast. But in that space, there are over 250 languages spoken. I'm not talking about dialects, and so you were confronted with diversity at every turn. And I remember growing up as a young person, you start to move around in the neighborhood and then eventually go to school, and you come home and go, who are those other people that are speaking those funny languages, And I remember that my dad, Okokon, Udo, and my mom, Grace, would always tell us, like, it's just different. That different doesn't mean better or worse, that it just is. And at the time, as little kids, it doesn't make sense. And as I was growing up, it started to dawn on me that it was something really foundational that they were putting in place for us to not look at people in terms of who is better or worse, who is in or out, but to see the complexity of our diversity and how they need to coexist. And I remember that I started venturing out, not out of fear anymore, but out of curiosity, as I was making friends and expanding, my own world and my awareness. So in a very real sense, I was embracing it, living it, and understanding it, and knowing that it wasn't just Christians. Half of Nigeria about half is Muslim, about half is Christian. So you were sharing the religious space, with other religions, and so that was cracked open. So when I think about it in the context of where we are, and in my reference to how I see myself and who I am, I talked about nature, and you brought it in so beautifully. Diversity is what nature gives us. And when you look at the ecosystem, it is interdependence, like you so, brilliantly, brought into it too, the interconnectedness at the root level, but also at the relationship and nurture level of each other to coexist, to help us have a world that is stable and thriving. So I don't know that we can have it any other way. We cannot. Let me frame it in that way. We cannot have it any other way if we sacrifice our interdependence and connectedness. We will inevitably sacrifice the whole sense of independence that we talk about or claim so boldly around the world.
Yeah.
It's the two have to go together. Yeah.
Good. Oh, I love that. It feels like we well, I keep saying this, I've been saying this for the last 10 years. It seems like we're at a crossroads. It's like, oh, we're at another crossroads. Oh, the pandemic. Oh, we're at another crossroads in terms of what it shows us. I know for me, as you were talking about this and just hearing your story about like your parents holding a foundation of like, and changing perspective of like, yeah, it can feel threatening, but it's like, it's just different. And then even that sense for you of the word that came to me was trust, of courage to trust and expand out. I can even imagine, you being younger and just dipping your toe in and like, oh, I think they're right. Oh, let me try a little bit more. Oh, I think they're right even more. And then feeling the nuance. I know for me, the three questions, and I pose this both to myself and having, teenage kids now as well. It keeps coming back to these three questions. And the last one is more Taoist in terms of this, but, asking them to ask this about themselves. I can't answer this for them, but do you know yourself? Do you trust yourself? And then the third question is, if you can answer those two, and those really are, your emotions, who you are, even the parts that you don't want to reveal necessarily, or it's hard to reveal to other people because it's scary and you're worried about judgment. Do you know yourself? Do you trust yourself? And then the last one is, if you can answer those and continue to answer them, are you willing to forget yourself to let something else arise? And that question,
is powerful.
Yeah, and that's a Taoist thing in terms of we sit and meditate, and the expression, it's in Chinese, it's 走光, which is sitting and forgetting yourself. And literally sitting, and where it's like, it's not me breathing anymore, it's me, it's not even me, it's this. And the practices of both meditation, but also in terms of realizing, in a real sense, not just with our minds, but also with our bodies and our emotions, that I know all of this, and yet it now allows me to open up more so and embrace, like you, in terms of taking these dipping a toe in, and then now a foot, and now something else, where it's like, it's just difference, and the possibility even that in doing so, we can only do this with ourselves in terms of answering those first two questions. Do I know myself? And sometimes I'll know myself better if I'm talking with somebody who's very different than me, because it'll show me some different things about how I'm thinking or feeling or whatnot. Do I trust myself? Can I live into what I believe, and let that breathe and possibly even change in many ways? That can only happen in terms of being in connection and community with people who have a different perspective, at least what I've experienced. And then it just continues to, seems like it's more momentum building. And a lot of that undergirds, probably for you too, in terms of having parents who looked after you, and my parents too, in terms of having some baseline of safety, and trust and ritual, and where they're practicing that with you, and with me too from the very beginning. But then we can actually do that with each other as well too. But it's amazing, and yet I think I'm appreciative of you sharing that journey. And I know there's, even though we're talking thousands of miles away from each other, it's different to experience it, in our presence together, as opposed to just reading off a page in that same way too. So good. Wonderful. Is there anything else before we close off? Any other thoughts for you?
The only other thought that I have is, we're talking about independence and interdependence, but in the context of independence and freedom that we brought in as we were defining this, I am always aware and humbled by the fact that not everyone achieves that sense of independence and freedom, even in the context where we are tying it to the Constitution in the way that you did at the beginning, when we started. And so just the acknowledgement that there are people that have different aspects of their lives that are still not freed up for them to be fully who they are, or to make choices that affect them in significant ways. And also the harm and the hurt that I cause, on the path of my own freedom, without being aware of who I am interacting with on my way and how I'm affecting them, in different ways. So I just want to bring that up, because here we go. There'll be fireworks. There will be a lot of grilling, but there'll also be a lot of tears and sadness and grief around the same, the meaning of what we are talking about, and to hold all of those as right, actually, and needed, rather than who are those people.
Yeah. Oh, that's a wonderful point. And I think it's a good reminder for us in terms of, like you said, are my actions hurting somebody else? Are my actions making it unsafe for other people to live into this? But then possibly even maybe deeper in terms of this idea and this promise, this place of potential where something may grow. How are we contributing it to a common ground for each one of us, to thrive into that and to prosper, which ultimately is that freedom as well. If we don't have that, then it's hard to be free, and acknowledging that a lot of folks do not have those avenues open at this point.
It's been great being in conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you.
I can look forward for the next version of our conversation, whether it's on camera or off camera. Really, just delightful being with you.
For me too. Thank you so much for taking this time. I'm excited for this collaboration, but also just everything else. And hopefully for the people watching, whatever collaboration brings, that we can, again, come in contact with each other and continue to live into these spaces and these questions with each other as well too. But thank you so much, Okokon.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.